Come January 1, there is set to be an impact of goods and services tax or GST on e-commerce players, including the food delivery platforms such as Swiggy and Zomato. What is set to happen is that Swiggy and Zomato would be treated on a par with a restaurant, which also means they're set to face 5% tax. So what does this mean for a customer? And what does this mean for an investor? I'm Sachin Dave, Senior Editor with the Economic Times, and we'll go through the implications that the change in GST law is set to have on these companies. So what is being changed is that up until now, whenever these companies, that is Swiggy and Zomato, were delivering food to you, they were merely passing on the GST wherever it was applicable. What happened thereafter was that there were certain sections of Indian entrepreneurs or restaurants who felt that they're not being treated properly, or at least that these companies, that the e-commerce companies should be brought at least on a par as far as taxation is concerned, and 5% GST should also be levied on these companies. So what this really means is that these e-commerce players will now have to charge GST on the food that they deliver. Now, this is set to throw a lot of complications for these companies. So how will this GST change or a change in the law will impact you as a consumer? So what was happening up until now was that if you're ordering food, say for rupees 500, the GST was being charged in certain cases on that 500. And the restaurant was passing that on to the Swiggy delivery person, and the food was being delivered to you. In some cases, whenever the food was being ordered from small restaurants or from dhabas, there was no GST applicable. From now on, what is set to happen is that the restaurants need not charge this 5% GST. The GST will be applicable on the total amount. That is, if Swiggy and Zomato are charging, say, 50 rupees delivery charges, then the GST will be on the 550 rupees. Now, there are a lot of complications as far as the food delivery startups are concerned. The first and foremost being, what will happen when you order food from dhabas? That is, the restaurant or the dhaba is not under GST, but Swiggy and Zomato will have to pay GST on that. The companies will have to ask these dhabas to get it registered. The second problem is on the cost that they levy on the deliveries. That is the delivery charges or the tips that you pay. What happens to that? Will 5% be included over and above on the total cost, or only on the cost of the food? That is not really clear. Also, in many cases, you may have observed that Swiggy and Zomato tend to give these coupon discounts or discounts. Whenever you go to Swiggy or Zomato, you may have observed that if you pay through a particular credit card or a debit card, then there is some cashback that's being given to consumers. Now, tax department may treat this as a barter, and under GST, even a barter is set to attract tax. As far as these companies are concerned, they have separate entities where the technology sits. Many tax experts have advised these companies that they start charging 18%. Now, it may look a little strange that why would you pay 18% instead of 5%? But as far as the 5% is concerned, that is the tax that is levied on restaurants, you do not get input tax credit on that. Why you may get input tax credit if you pay 18% GST? Input tax credit is essentially tax paid on raw materials that can be passed on to the customer, which means if your future tax liability is 100 and your input tax credit is, say, 25, other things remaining constant, you will be able to bring down your tax liability to 75 rupees. Now, this only means one thing. In the long run, the prices of the food that you order is only going to go up, especially at a time when Zomato is already a public listed company and Swiggy is planning to list or come out with an IPO. There is definitely a revenue pressure, and these companies have been burning cash all along, but it doesn't seem that they will be able to do so for any longer. So the real question is, does it really matter if your food bill goes up by about 20, 30 rupees? Probably it does to some people. But the bigger impact that this could have is on the operational models of these companies, which up until now was dependent on burning cash or was dependent on giving certain cashbacks to customers. While the profitability of these companies was already questioned, but now with GST, it is only set to bring more pressure on the profitability and the revenues of some of these companies.